Hello everyone, and welcome back to Mysterious Murmurs. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1, The Forgotten Carnival. The invitation. It started with a rumor. A post on a small town forum read, "If you find the old carnival in Silverwood Forest, don't stay past midnight. The show never ends." Mia, Alex, Rachel, and Jake were avid thrill seekers who ran a YouTube channel called Dread Hunters. They specialized in exploring abandoned places, always on the hunt for urban legends. When Mia stumbled upon the post, she knew it was their next destination. "People say it's cursed," Mia explained as they packed their gear. "A carnival that disappeared in the 1930s, only to reappear every few years. Visitors never come back." "That's the point, right?" Jake said, loading a drone into his bag. "Think of the views." Rachel rolled her eyes. "Let's hope it's not just some burned-out Ferris wheel." They set out on a crisp October afternoon, following vague directions from online forums. The deeper they went into Silverwood Forest, the more unnatural the air felt. By the time they spotted the carnival through the trees, the sun was already sinking. The sight took their breath away. The carnival looked untouched by time. Vibrant red and yellow tents stood in neat rows, their colors vivid against the gray sky. A carousel glinted under fairy lights, its horses frozen mid-gallop. The air smelled faintly of cotton candy and popcorn, yet there was no sound, no laughter, no music, nothing. "This is insane," Alex whispered, raising his camera. "It looks alive." "It's just well preserved," Mia said, though her voice lacked conviction. They crossed the overgrown path leading to the entrance. A large sign arched overhead, the words "The Grand Carnival" painted in swirling gold letters. As they stepped inside, an old-fashioned ticket booth creaked open, and a yellowed envelope slid out. Mia picked it up, her hands trembling. The envelope bore their names in neat cursive. "Welcome to the performance of a lifetime," the letter inside read. The carnival comes alive. Excited but unnerved, the group ventured further. Jake launched his drone, capturing aerial shots while Alex filmed their reactions. They passed a row of carnival games. Glass bottles stood neatly stacked at a ring toss booth, their surfaces gleaming. Stuffed animals hung from hooks, their button eyes watching the group. "It's like someone's been maintaining this place," Rachel said, touching one of the prizes. "Or something," Jake joked, though his laugh sounded hollow. Mia stopped in front of a large tent with faded stripes. The entrance flaps rippled as though inviting them in. "Should check this out," she said. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of dust and mildew. Rows of wooden benches faced a stage, its red velvet curtains drawn closed. "This must have been where the main act performed," Alex said. As if on cue, the stage lights flickered on. The group froze. Slowly, the curtains parted, revealing a mannequin dressed as a ringmaster. Its painted face grinned grotesquely, and its eyes seemed to follow them. "This is creepy," Rachel muttered. The mannequin raised an arm, pointing to the group. A gramophone crackled to life, and a deep voice boomed through the tent. "Welcome, dear guests. The show is about to begin." The stage erupted in activity. More mannequins appeared, moving as if controlled by invisible strings. They juggled, danced, and performed acrobatics, their motions eerily lifelike. Mia backed away, her heart pounding. "This isn't possible." The ringmaster's voice echoed again. One by one, the audience joins the show. Games turned deadly, panicked. The group fled the tent. Outside, the carnival looked different. The pathways twisted unnaturally, and the vibrant lights now flickered ominously. "We need to leave," Mia said. "Let's head back to the entrance," Alex suggested, but the path they'd come from was gone. Instead, they found themselves in front of a towering Ferris wheel. Its cars swayed gently, though there was no wind. A wooden sign read, "Ride to Remember." "Do we have a choice?" Jake asked, glancing nervously at the others. As if in answer, the ride started on its own, the creaking of its machinery echoing through the empty fairground. "No way I'm getting on that," Rachel said, stepping back. Suddenly, the ground beneath her gave way. She screamed as she fell, landing hard on a platform below. The others scrambled to the edge and peered down. Rachel was in a mirrored maze, the reflections multiplying infinitely around her. "Rachel, stay there. We'll find a way to get you out," Mia shouted. But Rachel wasn't listening. She turned, captivated by something only she could see. "It's me," she whispered, staring at a reflection that moved independently. "It's perfect." Her doppelganger smiled and stepped out of the mirror. Before Rachel could react, it lunged, pulling her into the glass. Her scream echoed briefly, then silence. When the others reached the maze, it was empty, except for Rachel's distorted reflection, now frozen in place. Carousel's curse, Jake was next. As they ran, they stumbled upon the carousel. Its horses moved as if alive, their painted eyes rolling and their hooves scraping against the platform. "Let's avoid that," Alex said, but Jake was drawn to it. "It's like it's calling me," he said, stepping onto the platform. "Jake, don't!" Mia yelled, but it was too late. The carousel spun faster as Jake climbed onto one of the horses. His laughter turned to screams as the ride picked up speed, the colors blurring into a nauseating spiral. Mia and Alex watched helplessly as Jake's body began to change. His skin turned to wood, his features freezing into a grotesque grin. Carousel slowed, revealing Jake as a new addition to its collection of horses. The final act. Mia and Alex were the only ones left. Desperation and terror gripped them as they wandered through the ever-changing carnival. "This place is alive," Mia said. "It's feeding on us." They stumbled back to the main tent, the ringmaster waiting for them. "You have done well to make it this far," the voice boomed. "But the show must go on." The mannequins surrounded them, their glassy eyes gleaming. "Run!" Alex shouted, grabbing Mia's hand. They sprinted toward the entrance, now visible in the distance. The carnival seemed to fight them, the ground shifting and the air growing thick. Alex stumbled, falling behind. "Go, Mia. Don't stop." "Oh, I'm not leaving you." The mannequins closed in, dragging Alex back. His screams were cut short as he was pulled into the darkness. Mia reached the entrance, her chest heaving. She turned back to see the carnival collapsing in on itself, the tents folding and the lights winking out. She staggered onto the forest path, the carnival gone as if it had never been there. The never-ending performance. Mia made it back to civilization, her story dismissed as a hallucination. Months later, she received an email from an anonymous sender. It was a video of the carnival, perfectly intact. The camera panned to the stage, where mannequins resembling Jake, Rachel, and Alex performed under the ringmaster's watchful gaze. Mia slammed her laptop shut, but the sound of carnival music drifted faintly through her window. She turned to see a ticket on her desk. Admit 1. Story 2, Echoes in the Asylum, a mystery to uncover. Lauren was no stranger to dark places. As an investigative journalist, she'd explored forgotten factories, crumbling mansions, and even a shipwreck. But nothing prepared her for the eerie silence of Blackthorn Asylum. The asylum had been abandoned for decades, left to rot on the outskirts of a small town. Its history was steeped in whispers of cruelty, patients neglected, experiments gone wrong, and disappearances that no one could explain. Lauren had one goal: to uncover the truth. Her editor was skeptical, but Lauren's instincts told her this story was bigger than the rumors. Armed with her camera, flashlight, and a notebook, she entered the building just as the sun began to set. The entrance hall greeted her with peeling wallpaper, broken furniture, and an overwhelming smell of mildew. Her footsteps echoed loudly, reminding her she was utterly alone. So she thought. The first voice. Lauren had been inside for less than an hour when she heard it. A faint whisper. "Help me." She froze, her flashlight darting across the empty hallway. The voice was soft, childlike, and impossible to place. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling. There was no answer, just the creaking of the old building. Shaking off her nerves, Lauren pressed on. She explored patient rooms with rusted bed frames and scratched walls. The scratches formed words, no escape. Her camera clicked as she documented everything. Then the voice returned. "They left us here." It was clearer this time, as if spoken directly into her ear. She spun around, her flashlight illuminating empty space. "Okay, this is just my imagination," she muttered, but deep down she knew it wasn't. The files. Lauren found the records room on the second floor. Despite the decay, the metal filing cabinets were mostly intact. She rummaged through them, uncovering files on the asylum's patients. One name appeared repeatedly, Eliza Warren. Eliza had been admitted at the age of 12. Her file detailed a series of experimental treatments overseen by Dr. Gregory Harlow, the asylum's infamous head physician. The notes were clinical, almost detached. Subject shows resistance to sedation. Further sessions required. Lauren's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. The last entry simply read, "Subject terminated." Whispers grew louder, overlapping voices that seemed to come from every corner of the room. "They hurt us. They lied. Run!" Lauren backed away, clutching the files. Her flashlight flickered, and for a brief moment, she thought she saw a figure standing at the end of the hall. A girl with hollow eyes and a tattered hospital gown. When the light steadied, the figure was gone. The hidden wing. Lauren's discovery emboldened her. She wasn't just chasing a story anymore. She felt an obligation to uncover the truth for those who had suffered. The voices seemed to guide her deeper into the asylum, toward a part of the building she hadn't noticed on the blueprints. A rusted metal door marked restricted access barred her way. Using a crowbar from her bag, she forced the door open. The air inside was different, thicker, colder. The hidden wing was a labyrinth of sterile rooms. Unlike the rest of the asylum, this area was eerily preserved. Instruments lay on trays as if waiting to be used, and the smell of antiseptic lingered faintly. One room stood out. Its walls were covered in photographs of patients, each one pinned with a note detailing their treatment. Lauren's breath caught when she saw Eliza's face among them. Beneath the photos was a leather-bound journal. It belonged to Dr. Harlow. Lauren skimmed the entries, her stomach turning. Harlow had conducted horrific experiments, justifying them as advancements in psychiatric care. The final entry read, "Eliza is no longer responsive. The others are restless. The voices, they're everywhere." The haunting intensifies. As Lauren closed the journal, the door to the room slammed shut. Flashlight flickered again, plunging her into intermittent darkness. The whispers returned, louder than ever. They weren't just in her ears, they were in her mind, a cacophony of pleas and accusations. "You're like him. You'll leave us too. Why won't you help?" The flashlight died completely. Panic set in as Lauren groped for the door. Her fingers found the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Then she felt it, a hand on her shoulder. She screamed, spinning around, but there was no one there. The whisper stopped, replaced by a single voice. "She's waiting for you." The door creaked open on its own, and the flashlight blinked back to life. Trembling, Lauren stepped into the hallway. At the far end, she saw the girl again. This time, the figure didn't vanish. It turned and began walking away. Wait, Lauren called, chasing after her. The girl led her to the basement stairs. The basement revelation. The basement was worse than anything Lauren had imagined. It was a sprawling, windowless space filled with makeshift cells. Chains hung from the walls, and the floor was stained dark with age. In one corner, a large steel tank sat ominously. Its surface was rusted, but the words "isolation chamber" were still visible. Lauren's flashlight flickered, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. The whispers returned, angrier this time. They locked us here. They forgot us. They left us to die. Lauren's chest tightened as the air grew colder. Her breath came out in visible puffs. She approached the isolation chamber, drawn by an inexplicable force. The door was slightly ajar, revealing a pitch-black interior. Inside, she found a small figure huddled in the corner. It was the girl. "Eliza," Lauren whispered. The girl looked up, her hollow eyes meeting Lauren's. "Help us?" she said, her voice echoing unnaturally. "The escape attempt." Lauren reached out to Eliza, but the girl dissolved into smoke. The room seemed to come alive, the chains rattling and the walls vibrating. A deep, guttural growl filled the air. Lauren turned to see a monstrous shadow rising from the corner, its form shifting and twisting. It had no face, only a gaping void where its mouth should have been. The shadow lunged, and Lauren bolted. She sprinted through the basement, her flashlight barely illuminating the way. The whispers had turned into screams, a deafening roar of anguish. She stumbled up the stairs, slamming the basement door behind her. But the asylum wasn't done with her. The walls seemed to pulse, the building itself shifting to trap her. Hallways stretched endlessly, and doors led back to where she started. "No, no, no," she cried, tears streaming down her face. The whispers mocked her. "You can't leave. You belong here now. The final sacrifice." Lauren found herself back in the hidden wing, the journal still clutched in her hands. The voices quieted, replaced by Eliza's soft whisper. "You can end this," the girl said, appearing beside her. "How?" Lauren asked, her voice breaking. Eliza pointed to the journal. "Burn it. Destroy the memories. Set us free." Lauren hesitated. The journal was her only proof, her ticket to exposing the asylum's horrors. But as she looked into Eliza's eyes, she saw the unbearable pain of countless souls. With trembling hands, she lit a match and set the journal ablaze. The fire spread unnaturally fast, consuming the room and then the entire asylum. Lauren ran, the flames chasing her until she burst into the cool night air. She turned to see the building collapse in on itself, the screams of the trapped souls fading into silence. The aftermath. Lauren published her story without the journal, relying on her photographs and recordings. It became a sensation, sparking debates about the ethics of psychiatric care and the need to preserve history. Lauren knew the truth went deeper. She felt it every night in her dreams, where she saw Eliza's face and heard the whispers of the forgotten. One night, she woke to find a single note on her bedside table. "Thank you, but it's not over." The room grew cold, and faint whispers began to fill the air. Lauren realized the asylum hadn't just been a place. It had become a part of her. Story 3, The Cursed Village. The journey begins. Martha had always been drawn to the obscure. As an anthropology professor, she spent her career researching forgotten cultures and abandoned places. When she heard whispers about an isolated village called Black Hollow, she couldn't resist investigating. The village had a sinister reputation. Once a thriving community, it was now abandoned, with rumors of strange occurrences and a curse that drove the villagers to madness. No official records explained what happened, and the locals in neighboring towns refused to speak of it. Martha convinced 2 of her grad students, Ethan and Clara, to accompany her. They packed their gear, cameras, notebooks, and survival equipment, and drove deep into the forest where the village was hidden. By the time they arrived, the sun was sinking, casting the forest in long, eerie shadows. Black Hollow was unsettlingly quiet. The houses were intact but worn, their windows dark and empty. Ivy and moss crept over the wooden structures, as if nature were reclaiming the land. "Are we sure anyone ever lived here?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "People lived here," Martha said, staring at a decayed sign that read, "Welcome to Black Hollow." But where were they now? The first sign. The group set up camp in the village square, the most open area they could find. The centerpiece was a weathered fountain with a dry basin, its stone carvings depicting scenes of harvest and celebration. Ethan wandered off to explore, while Martha and Clara reviewed their notes. "Martha, look at this," Clara said, pointing to a sketch of a symbol they'd found in their research. It was a circle with jagged lines radiating outward, like a distorted sun. Martha nodded. "It's supposed to represent the curse. Legend says it's a seal to keep something contained." Ethan's voice cut through their conversation. Guys, you should see this." They followed him to the edge of the village, where he'd found a totem carved from blackened wood. It bore the same distorted sun symbol, but something about it felt wrong. The air around it was colder, and the ground beneath it was barren, as if life couldn't exist there. "Let's document it and move on," Martha said, uneasy. Clara snapped photos. The totem creaked, though there was no wind. The sound sent chills down their spines. The vanishing. That night, they built a small fire and shared theories about the village's history. Martha believed the villagers had succumbed to paranoia, their fear manifesting in the idea of a curse. Ethan was less skeptical. What if it wasn't just paranoia? What if there's something here? Clara laughed nervously. "Like what? Ghosts? Or worse," Ethan said, staring into the darkness beyond the firelight. As the night wore on, exhaustion overtook them. They retreated to their tents, the village shrouded in silence. Martha awoke to an unnatural stillness. The forest, usually alive with nocturnal sounds, was eerily quiet. She unzipped her tent and froze. Ethan's tent was empty, its flap wide open. His gear was scattered, and his flashlight lay abandoned, still on. "Ethan," she called, her voice trembling. Clara emerged from her tent, rubbing her eyes. "What's going on?" "He's gone," Martha said. They searched the village, their flashlights slicing through the dark. When they reached the totem, they found Ethan's camera at its base. The last photo he'd taken showed the totem, but in the background a shadowy figure loomed, its form twisted and unnatural. The symbols awakened. Martha and Clara retreated to the square, their nerves frayed. "What was that thing?" Clara whispered, clutching Ethan's camera. "I don't know," Martha admitted, "but we need to stay together. Whatever's out there, it's watching us." They spent the day exploring, hoping to find clues about the village's history. Inside one of the houses, Martha discovered a diary. The entries were erratic, describing strange occurrences. People hearing voices, seeing figures in the woods, and vanishing without a trace. The final entry read, "The seal is breaking. We've angered it. We cannot leave." Clara called from another room. "Martha, you need to see this." On the walls, etched into the wood, were dozens of the distorted sun symbols. They pulsed faintly, as if alive. Before Martha could respond, a loud crack echoed through the house. The floor buckled, and Clara fell through, landing hard in a basement they hadn't known existed. Martha scrambled down to help her. The basement was filled with more carvings and totems, their shapes grotesque. "Some kind of ritual space," Martha said, helping Clara to her feet. The air grew heavier, the symbols glowing brighter. Whispers filled the room, unintelligible and suffocating. "We need to get out of here," Clara said, her voice shaking. "The hunt begins." The two women ran back to the square, only to find the fountain overflowing with dark, viscous liquid. The once dry basin now pulsed like a heartbeat. "We're not alone," Clara said, backing away. Shadowy figures began emerging from the houses, their forms barely human. They moved unnaturally, their limbs jerking as if pulled by invisible strings. Martha grabbed Clara's arm. "Run!" Sprinted through the village, the figures closing in. No matter which direction they turned, the paths twisted back on themselves, trapping them. Finally, they ducked into a church at the edge of the village. The building was decrepit, its stained glass shattered, but it offered temporary refuge. Inside, they found an altar covered in ancient texts and more carvings. Martha flipped through the texts, desperate for answers. These villagers, they worshipped something, she said, something they tried to control. Clara pointed to a passage in one of the books. The seal must be reinforced with blood. Before they could make sense of it, the door burst open, and the figures flooded in. The truth revealed. Martha and Clara climbed the church's bell tower, the only escape route. Below, the figures swarmed, their hollow eyes glowing. "Can't keep running," Clara said. "What does the seal need?" "Blood, whose blood?" Martha's mind raced. Maybe it's not about whose blood, it's about the act. The villagers must have performed a ritual to keep this thing contained. "But they failed," Clara said, glancing nervously at the figures climbing the tower. Martha pulled a knife from her bag. "We have to try. If this thing gets out, it won't stop here." Clara hesitated but nodded. "What do we do?" Martha cut her palm, letting the blood drip onto the distorted sun symbol carved into the tower floor. Clara did the same. The symbols glowed brighter, and the figures below let out unearthly screams. The ground shook as the village itself seemed to react. The final stand. The final stand. The bell tower collapsed, and the women fell into the square, miraculously unharmed. The figures surrounded them, but they didn't attack. Instead, they parted, revealing a massive, grotesque entity rising from the fountain. Its form was ever shifting, its many eyes glaring at them with rage. "It's not enough," Martha said, realizing the ritual required more. The creature lunged, and Clara pushed Martha out of the way, taking the brunt of the attack. She screamed as the entity enveloped her, but her sacrifice bought Martha time. Martha grabbed a totem and plunged it into the fountain's pulsing core. The entity howled, its form dissolving into smoke. The figures vanished, and the village fell silent. The aftermath. Martha stumbled out of Black Hollow at dawn, alone. The village was gone, replaced by an empty clearing. Clara's sacrifice weighed heavily on her, but she knew the curse was broken, for now. Back in civilization, Martha published her findings, though she left out the supernatural details. Months later, she received an anonymous package containing a photograph of Black Hollow. The village was intact, the fountain dry once more. On the back of the photo were two words, "Not over." Story 4, The Forgotten Carnival, The Mysterious Invitation. Cassie wasn't the type to dwell on the past, but when a strange envelope appeared in her mailbox, she couldn't ignore it. The letter was written on aged parchment, the words carefully scrawled in ink. "You are invited to the grand reopening of Evernight Carnival. One night only, midnight." Cassie's heart skipped a beat. Evernight Carnival was legendary, a traveling fair that vanished 20 years ago without a trace. She'd grown up hearing stories of its mesmerizing performances and chilling disappearances. The address on the invitation led to the outskirts of town, where an overgrown field was all that remained of the carnival's last visit. Against her better judgment, Cassie decided to go. By the time she arrived, the field was transformed. The carnival was alive with bright lights, colorful tents, and hauntingly cheerful music. But something felt off. The air was heavy, and the laughter of the patrons seemed hollow. Cassie clutched the pendant, tears streaming down her face. She had destroyed the carnival, but her sister was still gone. As dawn broke, she noticed something in the grass, a locket that had belonged to her sister. Inside was a note, "Thank you for freeing us." Cassie smiled sadly, knowing she'd done the right thing, even if it cost her dearly. The haunting reminder. Weeks later, Cassie tried to move on, but the memories lingered. She often dreamt of the carnival, its lights flickering in the distance. One night, she found another envelope in her mailbox. "Thank you for visiting Evernight Carnival. Until next time." The story ends with a chilling suggestion that the carnival's curse isn't entirely broken, leaving readers on edge. Let me know if you'd like to adjust or expand further. Yara glanced over her shoulder, as if expecting someone to burst in. "They've brought you here for a reason. You must leave before midnight." Before Cassie could ask what she meant, Yara's tent flap flew open. A towering man in a ringmaster's coat stepped inside. His face was obscured by a shadow, but his presence was suffocating. "Enjoy the carnival," he said, his voice smooth and commanding. "Madam Yara, our guest has seen enough." Yara shrank back, and Cassie was escorted out. With a stew. 3. The performers. Cassie tried to shake off the unease as she explored the carnival. She entered the main tent, where a performance was underway. Ringmaster stood in the center, his booming voice announcing the acts. "Ladies and gentlemen, prepare to be amazed." The performers were extraordinary. A contortionist whose movements defied anatomy, a fire breather whose flames danced like living creatures, and a knife thrower whose blades always landed impossibly close to his assistant. The crowd clapped, but their applause was eerily synchronized. Cassie's unease grew when she noticed something strange about the performers. Their smiles were painted on, their eyes glassy. Then she saw her. One of the trapeze artists was a girl Cassie recognized from her childhood, a girl who had gone missing when the carnival last came to town. Cassie's stomach churned. "This isn't possible," she whispered. The girl locked eyes with Cassie, her expression pleading before she disappeared behind the curtain. Warnings Cassie tried to leave, but the carnival seemed to stretch endlessly. Every path brought her back to the center, where the towering Ferris wheel loomed like a sentinel. She ducked into a smaller tent labeled Hall of Mirrors. The air inside was cold, and her reflection multiplied endlessly in the mirrored walls. "Cassie," a voice whispered. She spun around. One of her reflections was moving independently. It leaned closer to the glass, its eyes filled with fear. "Leave now. They're watching you." Cassie's throat tightened. "Who's watching?" The reflection didn't answer. Instead, it dissolved into smoke, leaving her alone. As she stumbled out of the tent, she collided with a performer dressed as a clown. His painted smile stretched unnaturally wide. "Don't wander too far," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "The fun is just beginning." Cassie pushed past him, her heart racing. Midnight approaches. The clock in the carnival square struck 11:30. Cassie's fear grew with every passing second. She had to find answers and a way out before midnight. She returned to Madame Yara's tent, hoping for guidance. "You came back," Yara said, her voice a mixture of relief and dread. "What's going on here?" Cassie demanded. "Why can't I leave?" Yara hesitated before speaking. "The carnival feeds on souls. Every 20 years, it reappears to claim new victims. You were invited because you're connected to its past." Cassie's mind reeled. "What do you mean, connected?" Yara pointed to a photograph on her table. It showed the carnival performers, including the trapeze artist Cassie had recognized. "That's my sister," Cassie whispered. Yara nodded. "She was taken, just like the others. If you don't leave before midnight, you'll be trapped here too." "Then help me," Cassie pleaded. Yara handed her a pendant with the same symbol etched into its surface, a twisted spiral. This will protect you. Find the ringmaster's tent. Destroy the heart of the carnival. The ringmaster's tent. Cassie followed Yara's instructions, weaving through the labyrinth of tents and rides. The carnival seemed alive, the paths shifting to confuse her. Finally, she found the ringmaster's tent. It was larger than the others, its red and black stripes glowing faintly. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of decay. At the center of the tent stood a pedestal, and atop it was a glowing crystal, pulsing like a beating heart. The ringmaster appeared from the shadows, his face finally visible. It was pale and featureless, with empty sockets where eyes should have been. "You've come far," he said, his voice resonating unnaturally, "but you cannot win." Cassie gripped the pendant tightly. "I'm ending this." The ringmaster laughed, his form twisting into something monstrous. His limbs elongated, and his shadow spread across the tent like a living thing. Cassie lunged for the crystal, but the ringmaster intercepted her. His clawed hand swiped at her, barely missing as she ducked. "You cannot destroy what you don't understand," he hissed. The pendant in Cassie's hand began to glow, its light repelling the ringmaster. She realized it was her only weapon. Using the pendant's light, she forced the ringmaster back. His screams echoed through the tent, shaking its walls. Cassie reached the pedestal and slammed the pendant into the crystal. A blinding light erupted, and the entire tent began to collapse. The ringmaster's form disintegrated, his screams fading into silence. The escaped Cassie ran as the carnival fell apart around her. The tents deflated, the rides crumbled, and the performers dissolved into mist. She stumbled into the field, gasping for air. The carnival was gone, replaced by an empty, silent night. Cassie clutched the pendant, tears streaming down her face. She had destroyed the carnival, but her sister was still gone. As dawn broke, she noticed something in the grass, a locket that had belonged to her sister. Inside was a note, "Thank you for freeing us." Cassie smiled sadly, knowing she'd done the right thing, even if it cost her dearly. The haunting reminder. Weeks Cassie tried to move on, but the memories lingered. She often dreamt of the carnival, its lights flickering in the distance. One night, she found another envelope in her mailbox. "Thank you for visiting Evernight Carnival. Until next time." The story ends with a chilling suggestion that the carnival's curse isn't entirely broken, leaving readers on edge. Let me know if you'd like to adjust or expand further. Story 5, The Whispering Forest. The Unexpected Call. Lena was a park ranger accustomed to solitude. She spent her days patrolling the vast wilderness of Blackwood Forest, a sprawling expanse known for its beauty and mystery. Over the years, she'd heard tales of strange happenings, whispers carried on the wind, shadows that moved on their own, but she dismissed them as folklore. One evening, as Lena prepared to leave her station, her radio crackled to life. "Ranger Post 7, we've received a distress call from Blackwood Forest. A group of hikers is missing near the Hollow Trail. Please investigate immediately." Lena frowned. Hollow Trail was deep in the forest, a place even seasoned hikers avoided. The call was unusual. Distress signals rarely came from such remote areas. She grabbed her flashlight, map, and first aid kit before heading out. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the forest in twilight. The air grew colder as she ventured deeper, her boots crunching on the undergrowth. But as she approached Hollow Trail, a strange silence enveloped the area. No rustling leaves, no chirping insects, just an oppressive, unnatural quiet. The abandoned campsite. Lena found the hikers' campsite at the edge of the trail. The tents were intact, the campfire cold, but there was no sign of the hikers. Their backpacks and supplies were scattered, as if they had left in a hurry. She called out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" Her voice echoed through the trees, unanswered. Lena noticed something odd, a journal lying open near one of the tents. She picked it up and skimmed the last few entries. Heard something in the woods tonight. It didn't sound like an animal. Sarah thinks I'm imagining things, but I know what I heard. Next entry was hastily scrawled, voices. They're calling our names. We need to leave. Lena's pulse quickened. She stuffed the journal into her bag and scanned the area. A faint trail of footprints led deeper into the forest. Against her better judgment, she followed them. The first encounter. The trail wound through dense trees, the canopy above blotting out the moonlight. Lena's flashlight flickered, casting erratic shadows. She tried the radio again, but all she got was static. As she pressed on, she heard it. A faint whisper, like someone speaking just out of earshot. "Who's there?" she called, shining her flashlight around. Whispering stopped, replaced by an eerie rustling. The trees seemed to close in, their branches gnarled like grasping hands. Lena's foot caught on something and she stumbled. Looking down, she saw a crude wooden figure, a totem, its face carved in a grotesque snarl. The whispering returned, louder this time. It wasn't one voice, but many, overlapping in an incomprehensible cacophony. Lena backed away, her flashlight illuminating another totem, and then another. They surrounded her, their twisted faces seeming to mock her. Panic set in, but she forced herself to stay calm. She followed the footprints, desperate to find the missing hikers, the lost souls. The trail ended abruptly at a clearing. In the center stood a massive tree, its roots clawing at the earth like the limbs of a giant beast. Hanging from the branches were more wooden totems, swaying gently despite the still air. Beneath the tree she saw them, the hikers, stood motionless, their faces blank, their eyes unfocused. It was as if they were in a trance. Lena approached cautiously. "Hey, are you okay?" One of them, a young woman, turned to her. Her movements were stiff, unnatural. When she spoke, her voice was hollow, as if it came from somewhere far away. "You shouldn't have come here." Before Lena could respond, the whispers returned, louder than ever. The hikers began to chant in unison, their voices merging with the whispers. The ground trembled, and the massive tree seemed to pulse, its bark rippling like flesh. Lena's instincts screamed at her to run, but she couldn't leave them behind. Shadow within, Lena shouted over the whispers. "Snap out of it! Come on, we have to go!" The hikers didn't respond. Instead, their chanting grew more frantic, their eyes glowing faintly. A shadow detached itself from the tree, forming into a humanoid figure. Its body was shrouded in darkness, its eyes burning like embers. "You do not belong here," it said, its voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the earth. Lena stood her ground, though fear clawed at her. "What have you done to them?" "They are mine," the figure replied. "As you will be." The shadow lunged, and Lena dove out of the way. She grabbed a fallen branch and swung it at the figure, but it passed through harmlessly. The whispers grew deafening, filling her head with disjointed words and chilling laughter. She spotted a carving on the tree's trunk, a spiral symbol surrounded by strange runes. Instinct told her it was important. The ritual, Lena fumbled for her knife and began carving into the symbol, hoping to disrupt whatever power it held. The shadow screamed, its form flickering like a dying flame. The hikers collapsed, their chanting silenced. The whispers faded, replaced by an unnatural stillness. Lena turned to the hikers, shaking them awake. "We need to go now!" They were disoriented but able to move. Together, they fled the clearing, the oppressive presence of the shadow chasing them. The forest seemed to fight their escape. Trees twisted into unnatural shapes, and the ground turned to mud, trying to swallow them. Lena led the group back to the campsite, where the forest's grip finally loosened. They collapsed, gasping for breath. "Warning," As dawn broke, the forest seemed almost normal again. Birds chirped, and the sunlight pierced through the canopy. The hikers were shaken, but unharmed. They recounted their experiences, hearing whispers, feeling compelled to go deeper into the forest. Lena retrieved the journal from her bag and flipped to the last page. To her horror, the handwriting was her own. "It's not over. The forest always remembers." Her blood ran cold. The hikers stared at her, their faces pale. "What does that mean?" one of them asked. Lena didn't have an answer. The aftermath. Weeks later, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed her out of Blackwood Forest. The whispers returned, faint but persistent, haunting her dreams. One night, she found a wooden totem on her doorstep, its twisted face grinning up at her. The forest hadn't let her go. It never did.